the silence that resonates. In a tense boardroom meeting, voices clash like waves in a storm. Opinions fly, solutions overlap, tension mounts. But then, one man sits still. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't force his point. He simply watches. And without a single word, he becomes the center of the room. Everyone turns to him, not because of what he said, but because he said nothing at all. In a world that rewards speed, volume, and self-promotion, this moment seems strange, but it taps into something ancient. Silence unsettles us because we are no longer used to it. We fill every gap with noise, afraid of awkward pauses or being misunderstood. Yet, ironically, the one who stays silent often holds the most power. Why? Because silence is not emptiness, it is contrast. In the same way that darkness makes light visible, silence makes meaning sharper. Like the sudden dimming of lights before a movie starts, it prepares us. It signals that something important is about to happen. When someone chooses not to speak, it forces others to wonder why. And in that wondering, a tension builds. We are conditioned to equate speaking with confidence. But true confidence does not rush to be heard. It waits. It observes. It understands that timing is everything. Silence is not hesitation. It is control. Think about the people who have truly influenced you. Were they loud, or were they intentional? Did they speak constantly, or did they choose their words with care? The truth is, silence carries a kind of authority that no amount of talking can replicate. It speaks not to the mind, but to the instinct. It commands the room without raising a voice. So when someone remains quiet in a room full of noise, they do not disappear. They rise. Their presence becomes louder than words. Because silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of power. The price of speaking too much. We live in an age where silence feels like a void that needs to be filled. People talk endlessly in meetings, overshare on first dates, and narrate every detail of their lives online. But beneath this flood of words lies a deeper fear, the fear of being forgotten. So we speak, we explain, we justify, not because we always have something meaningful to say, but because we're terrified of disappearing into the background. This fear manifests everywhere. In the workplace, we think constant talking proves our value. In relationships, we mistake oversharing for intimacy. On social media, we chase likes and validation with captions, stories, and opinions. But here's the quiet truth: when you speak without intention, you dilute your presence. Every unnecessary word is a drop of ink that clouds the clarity of who you are. The philosopher Pascal once said that all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. When we speak without pause, we're not always communicating. Sometimes we're just escaping ourselves. We use noise to mask our insecurity. We fear that if we stop talking, others will stop caring. But the opposite is often true. Ask yourself this: why are the people who talk the most usually the ones we listen to the least? It's not just about volume, it's about weight. When someone speaks constantly, their words lose density. There's no contrast, no surprise, no mystery. You begin to predict what they'll say before they even say it. And once that happens, your attention fades. The human brain is wired for contrast. We tune out patterns. We crave unpredictability. When someone always speaks, they become static, and static becomes background noise. Think about it. If you tell someone everything about yourself in the first hour of meeting them, what is left for them to discover? What room do you leave for connection to unfold naturally? Speaking too much is like showing all your cards before the game begins. The tension is gone, the curiosity disappeared, the energy collapses, and yet we keep doing it because saying more feels safer. We convince ourselves that if we fill the silence, we stay in control. But in truth, control lies in restraint. Mastery lies in knowing what not to say. Power lies in knowing when to pause. Excessive talking is often driven by ego. The ego needs to be seen, heard, validated. But real presence doesn't demand attention, it attracts it. When someone speaks only when necessary, every word becomes significant. There's a weight to their silence, a thoughtfulness behind their timing. They don't perform, they communicate. And that difference is everything. Psychologically, we are drawn to what we do not fully understand. This is the law of curiosity. We lean in when we sense there's more to uncover. Mystery creates magnetism, but mystery cannot exist when everything is on display. Overexposure kills attraction, whether it's in a conversation, a relationship, or even in branding. The most powerful brands don't explain everything. They suggest, they hint, they allow space for interpretation. The same applies to people. When you talk too much, you remove that space. You rob others of the chance to be intrigued by you. And over time, people stop asking, not because they're rude, but because you already told them everything. And now, there's nothing left to explore. This isn't a call to silence yourself completely. It's a reminder to choose your words with care, to recognize that value isn't created by volume but by intention, to understand that the way you hold back can say more than what you reveal. Think of conversation like music. The most moving melodies are not made of non-stop notes, but of carefully placed rests between them. Those pauses make the music breathe. Your words should do the same. So here's the question. What would happen if you spoke a little less today? If you left some thoughts unspoken, not out of fear, but out of confidence? What if you let others lean in instead of chasing their attention? What if your silence was not a gap, but a signal? A sign that something deeper is unfolding, quietly, deliberately, within you. When you speak less, you make room for impact. When you speak with intention, you become unforgettable. And when you hold back the unnecessary, what remains is presence, power, and intrigue. The insecurity hiding behind every word. There's a strange discomfort that surfaces in silence. Most people rush to fill it. Not because they have something urgent to say, but because the quiet feels like a mirror they'd rather avoid. So they speak, they ramble, they repeat themselves. But what's really going on beneath all that noise? The truth is unsettling. Most of the time, we don't speak to be understood. We speak to feel safe. Every sentence becomes a buffer between us and what we're afraid others might see. We explain more than needed, not to communicate, but to control the way we're perceived. We throw out jokes we don't mean, laugh when things aren't funny, and talk just to escape that uncomfortable stillness inside. It's a form of self-soothing, like a child clutching a blanket in the dark. We reach for words when we feel exposed. But in doing so, we often reveal more of our insecurity than our confidence. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That quote echoes through every impulsive reply, every overcompensation, every desperate need to be liked. When we don't understand ourselves, we become addicted to external validation. And one of the quickest ways to chase it is through language. talking becomes a shield. We speak to convince others we're okay because deep down we're not sure if we are. We over-explain because we don't trust our actions to speak for themselves. We narrate our lives out loud hoping someone will tell us we're doing it right. But the more we try to manage perception, the more we disconnect from authenticity. Look closely and you'll see the signs. Repeating stories no one asked for. Offering justifications no one demanded. Smiling in moments that don't deserve a smile. These are not acts of openness, they are symptoms of unease. And the irony is, the more we try to cover our insecurity with words, the more visible it becomes. And imagine building a fence out of paper. The more sheets you stack, the more fragile it looks. That's what over-talking does. It doesn't protect you, it exposes how much you fear being seen for who you are without the words. Insecurity rarely shouts, I'm afraid. It whispers behind your need to explain every choice. It hides in the urge to defend yourself before anyone questions you. It masks itself as humor, as oversharing, as endless conversation. But the root is the same, an inner voice that doesn't feel safe unless it's speaking. This is why silence terrifies some people. It removes the illusion of control. It forces us to sit with what we don't fully understand about ourselves. And that can be deeply uncomfortable. But discomfort isn't always a signal to run. Sometimes it's a sign that we're on the edge of something important. What would happen if we stopped using words to run from ourselves? If we let silence reveal instead of conceal? That's a question most avoid, because silence feels like surrender. But in reality, silence is exposure. And exposure, when faced with courage, leads to clarity. When you become aware of your inner landscape, you no longer need to build fences of speech. You start to trust the strength of your presence. You realize that being understood by others matters far less than understanding yourself. From that place, your words lose their desperation. They no longer beg to be accepted. They simply reflect what already is. Insecurity is loud. It wants to explain everything. But self-awareness speaks softly. It doesn't need to fill space. It occupies it. And that's a powerful shift. We've all been in conversations where someone dominates the room, not because they're confident, but because they're anxious. You can feel it in the way they jump from topic to topic, never pausing to breathe, always looking for nods of approval. Their energy doesn't invite you in. It pushes you away, because underneath the surface, their words aren't invitations. They're defenses. The question is, how often do we do the same? How often do we use speech to shield rather than connect? This isn't about speaking less just for the sake of it. It's about noticing the intention behind every sentence. Are you speaking to share or to cover up? Are you expressing or protecting? When you understand this difference, you begin to listen more even to yourself. You catch the moments when your words are driven by fear. You pause, and in that pause, something new happens. The need to perform begins to dissolve, and what's left is presence. The more you practice sitting with silence, the less scary it becomes. You start to see it not as absence, but as space. Space to observe, to reflect, to just be. You realize that silence isn't empty, it's honest. And here's the twist. The very insecurity that drove you to speak constantly can become the bridge to deeper strength. When you stop using words to run, you start using them to connect. And when you no longer fear silence, you start attracting others who are drawn to your calm. This is where mystery begins. When you speak only what's essential and trust the rest to be felt rather than said. Because sometimes, the deepest truths are not spoken. They are sensed in the silence between sentences, and that's where we're headed next. The mystery that makes you unforgettable. In relationships, most people focus on saying the right thing. They rehearse lines, polish stories, explain their past, their plans, their preferences. They believe that the more they reveal, the more connection they'll create. But the truth is this: what draws people in is not what you say. It's what you don't. Mystery is not manipulation. It's not about playing games or being evasive. It's about recognizing a powerful truth. Curiosity fuels attraction, and curiosity lives in the unknown. When you speak less, you leave room for imagination. You invite the other person to lean in, to fill in the gaps, to wonder. And in that wonder, connection deepens. A man who knows how to stay silent at the right moments isn't cold or distant. He's present, he's deliberate, and that presence creates space for tension, interest, and emotional gravity. Because people aren't drawn to what's obvious. They're drawn to what challenges them to think, to feel, to explore. Imagine two men on a date. One talks constantly about his career, his ex, his childhood, his goals. He's articulate, confident, expressive. The other listens, speaks only when needed, and leaves pieces of himself unspoken. Which one will she remember later? Not necessarily the one who said more, but the one who made her think more. The one whose silence asked better questions than the other's words answered. This isn't about withholding for the sake of control. It's about understanding human nature, especially female psychology. Women, generally speaking, are intuitive. They don't just hear what you say, they feel what you're holding back. And it's in that subtle tension between what's revealed and what's reserved. That emotional engagement takes root. Curiosity is sparked by contrast. When someone gives you everything up front, there's nothing left to discover. No tension, no emotional pacing. It's like finishing a movie plot in the first 10 minutes. Where's the thrill? But when someone reveals just enough to intrigue you while leaving space for your own imagination to roam, the interest becomes personal. You're no longer listening. You're invested. Mystery activates the mind. It turns passive observation into active pursuit. It creates a sense of depth, of complexity, even if the person hasn't said much. Why? Because the human brain fills in blanks. And when someone doesn't tell you everything, your mind starts weaving stories. It projects layers, intentions, meanings. That's why mystery is powerful. Not because of what it is, but because of what it inspires in the other person. Think of classic cinema. The most captivating characters weren't the ones who explained themselves. They were the ones whose silence became a canvas for your imagination. You felt like there was always more under the surface. That's what makes someone unforgettable. And it's not just fiction. That psychology plays out in real life every day. When you reveal everything too quickly, you rob the other person of the joy of discovering you. You take away the emotional journey. But when you reveal parts of yourself over time, when you share thoughtfully instead of impulsively, you turn connection into exploration. And exploration keeps relationships alive. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you keep certain parts of yourself sacred, you protect your own identity. You preserve your sense of wholeness. You show that you don't need external validation to feel complete. That level of inner stability is rare. And because it's rare, it's incredibly attractive. Here's the twist. Women don't lose sleep over the man who explained everything. They lose sleep over the one they still can't quite figure out. Not because he's confusing, but because he's real in a way they're still trying to understand. He's not putting on a show. He's simply not trying too hard. And that calm confidence in holding space, not just filling it, is what sets him apart. This challenges the modern impulse to overshare, to narrate, to constantly assert who you are. But power doesn't always declare itself. Sometimes it's felt quietly, deeply, through presence, not performance. Holding something back doesn't mean you're hiding. It means you respect the depth of who you are. It means you trust that the right people will take the time to know you, not because you handed them the blueprint, but because they felt compelled to look deeper. The man who keeps a piece of himself unspoken is not incomplete. He's layered. And in those layers lies depth, intrigue, and the kind of emotional texture that lingers in someone's mind long after the conversation ends. When you begin to understand this, you stop trying to impress. You stop trying to convince. You stop trying to over-explain your worth. You simply allow your presence to speak for itself. And presence, when grounded in mystery and confidence, speaks louder than any performance. It doesn't chase, it invites. It doesn't push, it pulls. And those who are drawn to it don't come out of obligation. They come out of curiosity. So next time you feel the urge to explain, to reveal, to fill the silence, pause. Ask yourself, what would it mean to let them wonder, to let them discover, not just be told? Because the truth is simple. The less you force people to understand you, the more they want to. And when you learn to hold that space, to resist the pressure to overshare, you don't just become attractive. You become unforgettable. The pause that gives your words power. The brain is not a machine built to receive non-stop input. It's a living system that absorbs, processes, and reacts, and it needs space. When you speak without pause, you overload that system. Your words stack like pages of a book with no spacing between paragraphs. The message may be valuable, but the brain cannot absorb it. It needs rhythm. It needs contrast. It needs silence to understand. Here's what neuroscience tells us: when you pause in conversation, especially after a key idea, the listener's brain engages more deeply. That pause allows emotion to settle and meaning to form. Without that gap, ideas pass like traffic with no stop signs. Fast, crowded, and forgettable. Great speakers understand this instinctively. They know that the power of a message lies not just in what is said, but in the space around it. A pause isn't hesitation, it's punctuation. It's the period after a truth. It's the breath that lets an idea land. Watch Steve Jobs deliver a product launch. He didn't rush, he paced. He let the room breathe with him. He would drop a line, then step back, allowing the weight of it to hang in the air. And one more thing. He said it quietly, slowly, with a pause before and after. And it electrified the room, not because of volume, but because of space. Barack Obama, known for his cadence and gravity, mastered this art. His speeches are filled with intentional breaks. After delivering a key point, he often stopped not to think but to let you feel. That stillness made his next sentence more powerful. It created a sense of command. He wasn't filling time. He was guiding attention. Jordan Peterson, though very different in tone, uses the same principle. He often slows down mid-sentence, forcing the audience to lean in. He allows room for discomfort, contemplation, and depth. And as a result, his words carry intellectual and emotional density. This isn't coincidence. It's structure. It's psychological design. The pause gives shape to your speech the way shadows give depth to light. It signals that something important has just been said or is about to be, and that anticipation draws people in. Silence, used with intention, becomes a form of gravity. It pulls focus. It centers the listener. It's not just absence. It's a tool, a frame, a signal that says, "This moment matters." Think of a musical composition. The rest note, the beat where no instrument plays, is what gives the melody room to move. Without those rests, music becomes noise. Words are no different. If you talk without pausing, even brilliant thoughts get lost in the flood. This is especially important in emotionally charged moments. Whether you're inspiring a team, addressing conflict, or sharing vulnerability, silence is what lets the emotion land. It's what turns information into meaning. Imagine telling someone, "I'm proud of you," without any pause, and then rushing to the next topic. The words might register, but the feeling won't. But if you say it clearly, then pause, the emotional signal deepen. The brain has time to connect. The heart has time to respond. That's the difference a pause makes. But here's the twist. Most people avoid pauses because they fear losing control. They think silence means weakness or awkwardness. But in reality, silence is power. It shows that you're not speaking to impress. You're speaking to impact, and impact needs room to echo. We've been conditioned by fast content, non-stop scrolling, and short attention spans. But attention is not just about speed, it's about direction. And when you learn to use silence with intention, you don't lose attention, you focus it. People start to feel your words, not just hear them. And that changes everything. So the next time you're in a conversation or giving a presentation or simply expressing something important, practice the pause, say what you mean, then stop, let it land, let them feel it. Because when you pause, you do more than just stop speaking. You give your words weight, you give your message space to breathe. And in that space, people finally start to listen, not out of politeness, but because something about your presence tells them this matters. And once people sense that, they don't just hear your words, they hold on to them. When silence makes every word matter, there's a powerful moment right before something important happens. A pause, a breath, a sense that something is coming. And in that moment, attention sharpens. Focus narrows, emotion heightens. This is the power of anticipation, and it's what makes silence your greatest asset when you learn to use it well. In communication, anticipation makes people listen more closely. When you don't speak right away, people lean in. When you take your time, your words seem more intentional. And when you leave space between sentences, people fill that space with meaning. Their brains go to work, their emotions get involved. You're not just delivering words, you're creating experience. Hollywood understands this better than anyone. The most powerful scenes in movies are not always filled with action or dialogue. Sometimes, it's the silence that makes the moment unforgettable. Think of the seconds before a major plot twist. The screen goes quiet. The music fades. The character stares. The audience holds their breath. That silence builds tension. And when the twist finally comes, it hits harder. Not because of what's said, but because of how long you had to wait for it. That's not just cinematic magic, and that's human psychology. Our brains assign greater value to things we have to wait for. When someone doesn't speak immediately, we assume their words are important. When someone pauses before answering, we sense depth. The delay creates a kind of gravity. It pulls our attention forward and it makes us care. You don't need to be dramatic or theatrical to use this. You simply need to stop rushing. You need to slow down enough to let your words carry weight. You need to understand that communication is not a race to speak, it's an invitation to feel. This is where most people get it wrong. They think more words equal more value. But in reality, value lives in focus, and when you speak less but with purpose, people pay closer attention to everything you say. Because you've trained them to expect something worth hearing. Here's the twist. You don't need to dominate conversations. You don't need to talk over others or flood the air with opinions. You only need to make sure that every sentence you speak is deliberate, that every word feels earned. And the best way to do that is to let silence frame your message. Silence before you speak says, "I've thought about this." Silence after you speak says, "You should too." In between, your words become high definition, clear, undeniable, not because they're loud or clever, but because they've been given room to matter. Think of the people you respect most, the ones whose words stay with you long after the conversation ends. Chances are they weren't the fastest talkers or the most expressive. They were intentional. They didn't just talk, they delivered. And part of what made them powerful was the way they used silence to create expectation. But this isn't something you can fake. If your silence is empty, if there's no depth behind it, people will feel that too. That's why this kind of presence only works when it comes from within. You have to build something solid inside yourself. You have to develop calm, confidence, clarity. Because only then will your silence feel full, not awkward, strong, not uncertain. People can sense the difference. When someone pauses because they're grounded, it commands attention. But when someone pauses because they're nervous, it breaks the flow. So this isn't about technique alone, it's about foundation. And that foundation is inner strength. Inner strength allows you to stop chasing attention. You don't need to rush to prove yourself. You don't need to fill space just to feel seen. Instead, you trust that your presence is enough. You speak when you're ready. And when you do, people listen not because you force them to, but because something about you makes them want to. So the next time you're in a room, a conversation, a moment that matters, try this: say less, pause more. Let silence create the space. Let anticipation do the work. And when you speak, make it count. Because when silence surrounds your words, they stop being part of the noise. They become signals. They become moments. And in a world addicted to fast and loud, that kind of presence isn't just powerful, it's unforgettable. The secret of inner stillness. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The inner calm is the intelligent response to a chaotic world." He didn't say it was easy. He didn't say it came naturally, but he called it intelligent because it's a choice, a discipline, and more than anything, a kind of power that can't be faked. In a world that constantly pulls at your attention, pressures your emotions, and demands your reaction. Choosing silence isn't withdrawal, it's resistance. It's standing still when everything around you wants to move you. It's the opposite of being passive. It's a quiet form of strength. When you choose to be still, not just physically, but mentally, you stop being a puppet of the environment. You stop reacting to every opinion, every shift in energy, every piece of noise thrown your way. And in that space, you find something that most people never do: control over yourself. This is what separates leaders from followers. Not volume, not charisma, not command, but composure. The best leaders aren't the ones who speak most. They're the ones who know exactly when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. Their stillness commands attention because it signals one thing: they are not being pulled by the chaos. They are grounded. You've seen it before. A room full of people arguing, debating, trying to be heard. And then one person speaks, just one sentence, quiet, measured, and suddenly everything shifts. Everyone stops, listens, rethinks. That person didn't raise their voice. They raised their presence, and it came from within. Inner stillness is that presence. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about being solid, like a stone beneath the waves, unshaken, unimpressed by the noise above. You're not avoiding the storm, you're anchored beneath it. That's the image. Stillness is the rock under the ocean while the surface crashes and churns. People on the surface feel overwhelmed, but the rock doesn't move. It holds. And that's who you become when you master the art of inner calm. You stop being thrown around by circumstances. You become the constant in a world of variables. But how do you get there? That kind of composure isn't built overnight. It doesn't come from reading a quote or meditating once a month. It comes from practice. From choosing stillness in small moments, day after day. From learning to catch yourself before you react. From knowing that your silence, your pause, your refusal to be baited, that's where your power begins. This is not a performance. It's a pattern. And once it becomes part of who you are, others feel it. They feel it in how you speak, how you move, how you look at them without needing to convince or impress. Your energy becomes different. You don't have to explain it. People just know. That's why the man who masters stillness is so rare and so magnetic. He walks into a room and doesn't need to say a word. He carries something others can't quite name. He's not rushing to be seen. He's not pushing to be heard. He's already centered, already clear. And in that clarity, his words, when they do come, have weight. His silence doesn't create awkwardness. It creates tension. In the best way. Because you feel that when he speaks, he means it. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is for show. Stillness is also protection. When the world is chaotic, when emotions are high, when people around you are spinning, your calm becomes a boundary. It shields you from the temptation to react, to escalate, to mirror dysfunction. And that makes you a safe space for yourself and for others. Think about the moments you regret. Chances are they came from reaction, not reflection. From saying too much, acting too fast, letting your emotions run the show. Stillness gives you that pause. It gives you that breath. And sometimes that breath is all you need to change everything. But there's one more truth. Inner stillness doesn't mean you never feel. It means you don't let every feeling decide your next move. You let it pass through. You observe it. You honor it, but you don't become it. And that's maturity. So how do you develop it? Start with small things. When someone says something you disagree with, don't respond immediately. Sit with it. Let the silence speak first. When something upsets you, notice your body, your breathing, your urge to explain. Then pause. Let that wave rise and fall. Build rituals that ground you. 5 minutes of stillness each morning before the world enters your mind. A moment of breath before important conversations. A daily practice of reflection that asks, did I act or did I just react? These things may seem small, but they change you. Over time, you move differently. You speak with precision. You listen without the need to defend. You become the one people turn to not for noise, but for clarity. And here's the ripple effect. Ripple. The more grounded you become, the more grounded others feel around you. Your stillness becomes contagious. It spreads. It invites others to slow down, to listen, to think. And in a world that rewards speed and spectacle, that is a rare kind of influence. So don't underestimate the quiet strength within you. Cultivate it, return to it, Trust it, because the man who owns his stillness doesn't need to shout. His presence says everything. The art of speaking less but saying more. There's a quiet intelligence in those who speak with precision. You can feel it. They don't rush. They don't interrupt. And when they do speak, the room naturally adjusts. Their words carry weight, not because of their volume, but because of their timing. This is not luck. This is a skill one built through discipline, self-awareness, and a mindset shift. To master the art of speaking less but saying more, you need to internalize 3 simple but powerful principles. They are easy to understand but hard to live by. Yet once practiced consistently, they reshape not just how you speak but how you are perceived. Principle 1. Observe before you react. Before answering any question or responding to any comment, pause for 2 seconds, just 2 seconds. It's enough time for your brain to move from emotion to clarity. It stops you from reacting out of habit or defensiveness. That small delay creates space to choose your response rather than be hijacked by your instincts. This is not about hesitating, it's about becoming deliberate. In that space, you shift from being a reactor to being an observer. You see more, you hear better, and most importantly, you give your words a foundation of thought instead of impulse. Principle 2. Only speak if it adds value to the conversation. This might sound harsh in a world where talking is seen as participation. But contribution is not the same as noise. Speaking because you feel you should or to fill a gap often dilutes the impact of your presence. Instead, ask yourself, does what I'm about to say deepen the moment? Does it open the space? Does it clarify, uplift, or challenge with intention? If the answer is no, say nothing, because silence, when held with confidence, is often more powerful than a well-crafted sentence. And when you begin to speak from this place where every word has purpose, you become a signal in a world full of static. Principle 3. Stop making statements to control. Start asking questions to understand. Many people use language as a way to anchor themselves in control. They assert, they explain, they define. But mature communication is not about dominance. It's about connection. And nothing opens connection faster than a well-placed question. Asking questions, genuine ones, not loaded traps, shows that you're not here to win. You're here to understand. It tells the other person that their perspective matters. And ironically, this makes you more influential, not less. Because people listen to those who listen first. Now step back and see the bigger picture. These 3 principles are not tricks. They're habits of the emotionally grounded. They reflect a deeper truth that communication is not a performance. It's a relationship. The immature communicator speaks to impress. The mature one speaks to connect. This is the difference between the loud and the lasting. Loud voices rise quickly, dominate briefly, and fade. But the one who speaks from depth, who pauses, chooses, and invites, lingers in memory. Their words echo because they weren't thrown. They were placed. And here's the twist. When you stop speaking to prove something, you start speaking to discover something. You shift from expression to exploration. And in that shift, you unlock a whole new level of presence. People no longer feel like they're being talked at. They feel like they're in something with you. A moment, a thought, a path forward. You become less interested in being right and more interested in being real. And in that authenticity, your words start to align with something deeper, something others can feel. But this doesn't happen by accident. You need to train it. Because everything in modern life pushes you toward overcommunication. Notifications, quick replies, constant talking at all conditions you to react fast and speak first. If you want to reverse that pattern, you have to be intentional. Start small. The next time someone asks you a question, pause. Not because you don't know, but because you're giving the answer the respect it deserves. The next time you're in a discussion, wait until you know your words will truly serve. The next time you feel the urge to assert something, try asking a sincere question instead. Over time, this becomes second nature. You begin to speak less, but connect more. You gain a reputation not just as someone who's articulate, but someone who's grounded, someone who doesn't need to fill space because they already own it. And as that reputation grows, so does your influence. Because people crave depth, they crave presence. And when you offer it through your restraint, your clarity, your careful timing, they remember you. So build this rhythm. Build this patience. Let silence guide your speech. Let observation precede your reaction. Let questions replace assumptions. And let each word you speak feel like it belongs exactly where it is. Because the man who says less but says it right is not just heard, he is respected. Turning silence into a natural reflex. Silence, when used with intention, becomes one of the most powerful tools in your life. But for most people, it doesn't come naturally. We're conditioned to respond fast, explain quickly, and fill every pause. That's why mastering silence isn't about personality. It's about practice. It's about training your mind to pause before it reacts until that pause becomes effortless. Until silence becomes your second nature. Think of it like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets, and the less effort it takes to hold your ground in a moment that once triggered anxiety, defensiveness, or the urge to speak too soon. You don't need more theory, you need practice. And here are 3 ways to start building that muscle today. First, meditate for 10 minutes each morning. Not to escape the world, but to prepare for it. This practice isn't about reaching some mystical state. It's about creating space mentally and emotionally. 10 minutes of stillness teaches your nervous system that it doesn't need to react to every thought, every feeling, or every impulse. Over time, this builds what psychologists call response latency, the ability to insert space between stimulus and reaction. That space is where your power lives. That space is where silence begins. Second, keep a silence journal. At the end of each day, ask yourself, when did I choose silence today? When did I pause instead of pushing? When did I listen instead of interrupting? Write it down. Track it. This simple reflection trains your brain to become aware of your behavior in real time. It builds self-observation. And once you see the patterns, you start to change them not out of force, but out of awareness. Third, practice the power pause. Before you say something important, especially when emotions are high, pause for just 1 second. Breathe. Look. Then speak. This 1 second delay sharpens your clarity and amplifies your words. It shifts you from reaction to response. And the more you use it, the more natural it feels. Eventually, people start to notice. They'll sense that you don't speak out of habit. You speak out of presence. These 3 tools may sound simple, but their impact is deep. Because what you're really training is control over yourself, not suppression, not fear, but clarity, discipline, awareness. And like any muscle, silence responds to consistency. A few days of effort won't change your life, but a few weeks will shift how you show up. and a few months will change how others experience you completely. So start where you are. Don't try to master silence overnight. Just train it, trust it, and let it grow. Because the more you practice, the less effort it takes. And one day, without even thinking, you'll pause in a moment where you used to rush. You'll stay calm in a space where you used to react. And that moment, that shift is how mastery begins. And now, with that foundation built, there's only one question left to ask. When you let silence speak for you, you don't need to speak constantly to prove your worth. You don't need to fill every pause to stay relevant. The truth is, your value doesn't come from how much you say, but from how deeply you live what you say. And often, the most powerful thing you can do is simply be present. Fully, quietly, unshakably. In a world obsessed with attention, silence is your rebellion. In a culture that rewards noise, stillness becomes your signature. And when others expect you to perform, to explain, to overshare, your restraint becomes magnetic. It sends a message that says, I don't need to convince you. I know who I am. That kind of calm confidence can't be faked. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply holds space and lets others come to it. And they do. Because presence speaks louder than performance. Because stillness holds a gravity that words rarely match. When you stop speaking just to be heard and start speaking only when it matters, everything shifts. People pay closer attention. Not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. You're not fighting for their focus, and you're commanding it without effort. And the silence that surrounds your words that becomes part of the message. A pause after a truth, a moment of eye contact, a breath held just long enough to let something land. These are the things people remember, not just what you said, but how it felt to hear it. So as you move forward, remember this: silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's not absence, it's presence, sharpened, honed, disciplined. It's the space that gives your words meaning. And tomorrow, when you enter the world again, into meetings, conversations, decisions, you'll have a choice to make. Will you speak, just to speak, or will you stay still and let others quiet down just to hear you? Because sometimes in the silence between words, an honest look says everything.